Welcome to the Teachers Guild of New South Wales. The Teachers Guild of New South Wales acknowledges the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this event. We pay our respects to elders past, present of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters throughout Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. Patrick Nan. As the Vice President of the Teachers Guild of New South Wales, I would like to thank you for joining us for our Guild Education series on the topic today, the importance of social and emotional needs of gifted students. It is my great pleasure to be joined by our distinguished panel to discuss this important topic more broadly. Our panel this evening includes Lisa Allum, Assistant Gifted and Talented Coordinator, K-12 at Queenwood, Melinda Gindy, Diverse Learning Coordinator, Regents Park Christian School, Desilee Tait, Gifted and Talented Coordinator, K-12, Loreto Kirribilli, and Dr. Knussen from the School of International Studies and Education, University of Technology Sydney, and the Teachers Guild of New South Wales Councillor, who will be moderating this event. Thank you for our panel for joining us today. For some housekeeping, please feel free to share your experiences, thoughts, and questions in the chat function below, and pose any questions to the panel through the Q&A box on the Zoom control panel. Please keep your Q&A questions short and relevant to the topic on what we are talking about today. Our host will moderate and will tend to ask questions during our discussion panel. Thank you, Lisa, Melinda, Desilee, and Lauren for joining us today.
Thank you, Patrick. And good evening, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here this evening on this wonderful webinar. My name's Dr. Knussen, and I work in the School of International Studies and Education at UTS. So it's always a great pleasure to be involved in these webinars, which are so rich in what we provide to our audience and what we gain from our panel members. So this evening, I'm going to ask, first of all, I'm going to ask our panelists to give a brief introduction to themselves before we start getting into some of the nitty gritty of the issues related to working with gifted and talented students. So Desilee, I might ask you to go first and to give an introduction to yourself and the work that you do. And then audience members, if you have questions as you go through, as Patrick said, we'd be very interested in hearing what you would like to ask.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Yep, my name is Desi Tait, and I'm the K-12 Gifted Coordinator at Loreto Kirribilli. I've had 35 years plus teaching in the classroom, and now I coordinate the gifted faculty at Loreto. And I have a couple of staff members with me who work in the junior school and the senior school, and I do strategic planning for staff and professional development around gifted education. In 2017, I was awarded a Churchill Fellowship, which allowed me to travel around the world and visit what I consider the rock stars of education and learn about more strategies to cater for the gifted and talented student in our school. And at the same time, there was a lot of things that they talked about socially and emotionally that we could do for our students. So that's me for the moment.
We'll hear more about that very soon, hopefully. Thank you, Desi. Lisa, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. So my name's Lisa Allum, and I'm currently working as the Assistant Gifted and Talented Coordinator at Queenwood for years K-12. But my role is predominantly in the junior school at the moment. I have been coordinating gifted programs for about 8 years and been in the teaching profession for 15. And in addition, I've worked for UNSW in teaching the mini-coge and advanced mini-coge to upskill teachers in the field of gifted education. And my relationship with the Teachers Guild actually started when I won the Teachers Research Award, and my area of research was actually in social and emotional side of gifted students, with my research being on self-efficacy in gifted students in maths in particular. But I've also got an interest in perfectionism and written a journal article on that as well. So I'm really looking forward to being here tonight.
Thank you, Lisa. And Melinda.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be here in such esteemed community that we have tonight. So thanks, Lauren. So my name is Melinda Gindy. I'm the Diverse Learning Coordinator at Regents Park Christian School, which is located in the close to the geographical centre of metropolitan Sydney. So diverse learning, I oversee gifted and talented education, learning support, learning disabilities, and EALD, so English as a second language or dialect here at school. I wear a few other hats which take me on amazing provocative journeys. So I'm privileged to work with a wonderful team, the Australian Association for the Education of Gifted and Talented. So I'm president there and represent the AAGT on the Australian Alliance for Associations in Education. I'm a mum to 3 twice exceptional teenagers, so think of me and pray for me when you have a moment to. And in my spare time, I'm actually doing a doctorate in educational leadership, specifically in leading diverse learners, and that's at Western Kentucky University in America. So it's some exciting. So my research interests specifically are around the impact of policy and leadership on gifted education provision. So thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Melinda. Well, I think we might start by thinking about the sort of foundational concepts here. So about the identification of gifted traits, what do you have in place in your schools, or how do you approach identifying students who might be categorised as gifted and talented? Desi, I might come to you first on this one.
Okay, well, that's actually quite handy because I'm in the process of rewriting our draft policy or our position paper, which contains obviously a large section on how we identify our students. So we identify them subjectively and objectively. So we use both methods, obviously. Our objective measures, we use the ALSAT, which people know as being the Orwell testing. We use the COGAT. We use PAT information, obviously look at NAPLAN as well. So we use those sorts of things. We use Sailor's checklist, so that's a subjective measure. We use teacher nomination. We always have room for principal nomination within our program because, you know, there is always that student that does not fit in and does not test appropriately, but we all know that they have that ability. So we've always got that caveat of principal nomination. They can nominate for the program. And yeah, that's probably basically it. I do, obviously ALSAT and COGAT are outside testing, and so are NAPLAN results and all of those as well. But we get the results and analyse them and place the students somewhere along the spectrum between mildly to profoundly based on those sorts of results.
Wonderful, thank you. And Lisa, you're in the junior school. Do you follow similar approaches there?
Yeah, so we've got very similar approaches. We sort of have 3 categories and they run very parallel to what Desi was saying, but we think of the 3 as achievement, ability and other, which is more the subjective measures. So the achievement, we're looking at things that the students have actually been taught and how they're performing, which I guess when you think about gifted and talented, that sort of aligns more to talented, you know, they're reaching their potential. But we also look at ability testing. So as Desi said, we also use the COGAT and the AGAT, which just looks more at, I guess, things that they haven't been taught. We haven't prepared them for those, and we can look out and see which students, you know, maybe aren't performing in those achievement tests, but are showing us that they have a high ability. And we do the COGAT right from kindy, as we think early identification is paramount before any external factors, such as a lot of the social emotional ones that I'm sure we'll get to today, come into play. And then in our other category, there might be external IQ testing that students present with. parent nomination, teacher nomination, sometimes even peer nomination. You'll find students can sometimes be good at dobbing each other in at something. And things my young child has done, Sailor's Checklist, as Desi mentioned, sometimes reading that, you'll find what parents have said a student has done at home might be very different because they're in a comfortable environment. So what they're seeing, or even the way they developed as a young child, is really useful information for us. And then we can delve deeper into why we might be seeing a different child, and maybe they are those social emotional factors coming into play. So yeah, a good range of identification processes, and we're looking for patterns, and also what program they're going into. So if we've got a gifted maths program, it's no use looking at their all-well writing or, their NAPLAN writing. So we want it to be program specific. Sometimes we'll actually even have, we'll make our own little pre-test that relates to the topic. We also have some programs that are interest-based. So I think it has to align, identification should align with the programs being offered, but also it's useful to identify, in case you're not offering a program and you've got a gifted student and you need to find a program or even an individual program you can do with that student.
It's very complex.
Yeah, it's
what you do. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, isn't there? And a lot of different stakeholders involved.
Yes.
Melinda, you have similar experiences, and how much do parents play? How much of a role do parents play in this identification?
Oh, huge role. I'm a strong proponent of, parents being, and families, the wider family, being an essential, stakeholder in that conversation. So, and just as Lisa was mentioning, sometimes, we've got sort of the script of school, and sometimes, our square pegs don't fit in the round holes. And so, that insatiable, curiosity or depth and complexity sometimes doesn't appear out in the classroom. And we want to see and we want to hear what is going on outside as well, and how we might be able to nurture that. Similarly, and I'm in a school where we are culturally diverse. And so, our processes must include, culturally responsive processes. And so we're assuring that, any technically formal testing that takes place is particularly not aligned with, one has grown up in any particular culture. So it needs to sort of throw that net wide and make sure that's quite inclusive from that point of view. Similarly, some of our particularly younger, precocious students will come up and tell me, Mrs. Gindy, I'd like to be involved in, I heard there's a new debating club. Can I come to Chess Masters? Oh, tell me about that. Oh, I play with my uncle over the weekend. And so, when these opportunities are out there and promoted, and there's also a culture of it's okay to be involved in these things, the kids catch on to that, insatiability of, well, I really would like to be involved. So there is that important place of teacher, teacher nomination, parent nomination, student nomination, and as we were mentioning, that peer nomination. So those opportunities are really essential.
Yeah, fantastic. So I'm wondering what the average day looks like for a teacher and for a student who has these particular needs identified. Lisa, I might come back to you to talk about the younger years first, perhaps. What does the learning look like? And you've obviously identified that there are different programs and different traits. So what does that look like in the classroom on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So my role encompasses a bit of pull-out programs, which I'm taking a group of students for perhaps maths or English. It also, some students are better suited to one-on-one, doing an IEP, or I mentor them. But also my role is to help teachers differentiate their program, because at the end of the day, a gifted student is gifted 24/7, not the hour they come out and see me. So thanks, Melinda. So half my role is, looking at the programs with teachers where I can, offering ideas and suggestions of how we can differentiate for these students so that they're being catered for the whole day. So in terms of an IEP, it might be a student that just doesn't quite, they might be identified as having ability in, but they're not quite up to being in a extension maths class that's working at quite a high pace. It might cause them some anxiety. So they might come and work one-on-one with me, and they're particularly the students that we find have the most social emotional needs, I guess. And I'll look at an area of interest with them and work with them in their passion and their strength, or even twice exceptional students that may not quite like that pull-out group, or all of them. They might find it better to work one-on-one, to work on the strengths approach. But yeah, the average student, I would hope, would find through pre-testing, their teachers are finding out what the students know, so they're not having to sit and redo that. They're able to have curriculum that might be compacted, to have more complexity, depth, additional sort of projects and things of interest, or being able to skip certain things and do other things as modifications instead. I'll also have, for mostly the older primary years, there's often lunchtime activities. So there's external competitions like Da Vinci Decathlon, or currently we're training for the Gateway 8 competition. So they'll come at lunchtime and we'll work across different disciplines and work on teamwork skills and that kind of thing. So lots going on. And then we also have optional things for those kids who, I guess, you know, like the ones Melinda was saying, can we do this? There might be a philosophy thing that's open for others to join, whereas others might be based on a selection or being chosen for it.
Thanks, Lisa. And how does that change then when the structure of school changes, when they move into the secondary years? Desi, could you?
Look, I can talk, I can agree with everything that Lisa said. We do exactly the same as what, you know, basically the same as what Lisa's doing at Queenwood for the junior years. And as they go into the secondary years, it would be the same in Lisa's school and Melinda's school. We've done our identification, and we've got somewhere between 56 and 64% of our every year is in the gifted range. So range from mildly to profoundly. So we're working with a cohort of students where half the students are gifted. So what we decided to do 3 years ago was we built a strategic plan, and we've got a strategic goal for the whole school K-12, and that's the one goal that we're working on, and it's around catering for the gifted and talented student at Loreto. And as Lisa would know, because Lisa was here teaching us, we had every staff member trained by the mini coach, UNSW's mini coach. We know it's a relatively light touch. It's a great course, but it gave us all the same language. So this is K-12, but specifically you're saying 7 to 12, every one of the faculties we're going in and out of, they're talking about differentiation. That exactly as Lisa said, that these students are gifted Monday to Friday, 9 to 3. They're not just when they're doing the one ethics Olympiad competition or the one Da Vinci competition. They're gifted all round. So we decided to take the road that we would have everybody trained in it. It's now it's a contractual obligation now. If you become a new staff member at Loreto, you must do mini coach, and I do my best to. So this year we got 20 new staff members. Most of them are online, probably as I speak, or in the last couple of weeks doing mini coach again. So you must do it so that you're part of the group and part of where we're going with the momentum. And so that's really basically how we've decided that we cater for it, as well as I said, Ethics Olympiad, Da Vinci, all those other things that we're doing. We've got a common language between our 7 to 12 staff about what we do with these students.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So there's an overarching strategy, a very strong strategy, as well as the identified communication channels between staff, and all of that sort of thing is really laid out quite explicitly.
Yes.
Melinda, I'm wondering though about schools perhaps with limited resources, perhaps lacking the expertise on staff, or having less expertise perhaps on staff. Is there anything you can recommend or advise for schools and individual teachers in that situation?
Lauren, I'm glad you threw this question to me because I've been chomping at the bit to respond to this as I saw it pop up. I think, you know, schools need to be realistic. They need to have a look at where are we right now, and where are aspirations, and how do we track the path towards those aspirations. There's no point, if you're at the beginning in your school, wherever you are listening to this, there's no point sort of saying, I'm hearing these fabulous things, but there's no way we're going to get to the level that we're hearing tonight. Also, we won't start. You need to be intentional about starting with a coherence that this is what we're going to work towards, and then taking a stock take of saying, okay, what do we already have in our school? What expertise do we already have? Where are we at currently? That's what I did first when I came into this particular role, remembering that I'm across other diversity fields as well. We don't have the type of resourcing here we might see at some of our other elite independent schools. That is okay. It's okay to be comfortable with where you're at. But what we then did is I drew up what was called the Regents Park Christian School it's a 10-point blueprint for what we called Gateway 2.0. So we had a gifted and talented education program, but I drew up a 10-point blueprint, and the idea is to work through those items systematically so that we can be intentional about growing. One aspect was around training. And so it was really exciting because one of our staff this year, for example, has started a master's in gifted ed. So they've moved on to that. I want to design a program here that, you know, if one day I'm not around, it's going to continue, it's going to be feasible. The other thing that I think was a huge systematic change here is that we took a stock take of what special interests the staff had and what passion areas they had. And oh my goodness, the skill sets educators have. Now, sometimes they don't get to explore those with students who share those passions. But what I did was, first of all, stock take that and say, okay, well, what are the limitations we have for Jane to run a chess club at lunchtime? Oh, she's on duty. Okay, so we need to be intentional about mapping a time in the program that teachers can work outside curriculum on their area of interest and engage that. So we started last year and then went into lockdown, but we started what we call the enrichment electives. So years 7 to 9 now around to this year all come out for one period a week at the same time, and they work on areas like robotics and coding or debating or theatre sports or filmmaking. And so what we're doing is we're being intentional about breaking down the barriers based on a year group. We're giving time to teachers, just one period. Now, this is just one of the many things that should be done, but one. And we're saying, okay, we as a school value you as an educator, so you get this time as part of your allocation. You don't have to just give up your lunches or your after schools. And it's just really blossomed because suddenly we are seeing lunchtimes and after schools and pursuing of competitions here and pursuing of competitions there. And as that gets really comfortable, I will move into another area of our blueprint because I feel it's embedded. That works for our school, you know, in August of 2022. Next, we will move on to that next point. And so my biggest encouragement is to start with what you have, start with the skill sets of what you have, and then aspire and grow from there as to how you will be culturally responsive to your own school.
Wonderful, thank you. Some great ideas there. And I think, I mean, as far as I'm aware, there's also a lot of external support that people can access, that teachers can access if they want more ideas. I mean, we've had comments about how wonderful some of your ideas are for enrichment, but where can people go, would you say, Lisa, perhaps?
So, I mean, it's great that there's teachers obviously here tonight. There's a lot of, I guess, professional development, and I think even what I've found working at schools that haven't had quite the resources, or friends that aren't working, you'll find even the teacher who's doing their masters, she'll probably be right up there with the most updated research. She'd probably love to share what she's learned with a team of willing teachers and come back and, you know, practice what she's learned. There's also parent family groups, gifted groups that teachers can direct families to, that provide support. And I know in terms of, I don't know, it sounds silly, but there's Facebook groups that people can join where people share. I'm part of a gifted Facebook group, and people share their ideas, their lessons, programs, and I've actually got quite a few great things and tips about free resources from there. But maybe one of the others can add to places people can go.
Yeah, and actually, while you're talking, it just struck me that maybe if people in the audience are aware of groups that are great support, they could put those in the chat. So we can share them as well. So Desi, maybe you would like to jump in.
Yeah. Look, I've already noticed in the chat that someone's put Enrich, which I use quite a lot, which is a great resource. I know that the differentiator tool on the NESA website is a fantastic place if you're looking for some support. There's a lot of support out there that you can get. You don't have to spend the money to do mini-coach, even though mini-coach isn't, you know, overly expensive. There is lots of things out there. The other thing is, and Melinda and Leslie, you might be able to remind me, and that is all. Years ago, there was the modules from UNSW that were put out, and they were absolutely fabulous. And when I first did them, they were on CD. That's how long ago it was. But I noticed that they're on the web. You can Google them. They're on the web, and they're there for free. And you can just work. If you are a keen teacher and you want to do something with it, they're a great resource. Those curriculum models from UNSW, and that's free. That's free PD. I'm also noticing someone's written on their Mensa, which we've just started to get involved in as well, which really supports families. So, and you know, they've got a Facebook page, but I think you can join it, and it's $60 for the year, I think, to join the Mensa Association, and that's great for families as well, parents and kids. They can join that together. So, there's many things you can do that you don't have to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
Similarly, I'd probably want to share two in particular. The AAGT, so our National Gifted Association. If you go and have a look at the website, there's quite a range of resources there in terms of both articles and sharing the research into practice. But the AAGT just only very recently launched a brand new program that is centred around teaching resources and exemplars of teaching resources. Actually, there's three things I want to say. So that's one. The second one, and this is a huge takeaway, is Lani Kanevsky's Possibilities for Learning. So thanks, Pat, if you can Google that and put it in. But it's literally something like possibilitiesforlearning.com. It's a free strength-based tool that Lani Kanevsky has provided. And the students, you walk through it with your students, but the students basically do a survey and it spits out the individualized results of how a student would really benefit from specifics in differentiating the depth and complexity of content, process, etc. So it's an individualized one, and it's lovely free tool. It's amazing she has that available. The third thing I did, and I do this as professional learning with my staff, is the new CC, or the CC, so the Centre for Educational Statistics in Education in New South Wales. They did, Ben and Carissa did a fabulous literature review, and the literature review informed the new Department of Education Gifted and High Potential policy. The literature review, it's not heavy, it's so accessible, it's so fresh, and I've seen many schools around Australia actually access the review. I did it with my staff, made a whole PD around it, and it was that's really useful, that document. So that's available online as well, accessing for everyone.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you. And thanks, Pat, for putting those in the chat as well. Well, we might move on now to talk about some of the emotional and social needs of these students. So maybe, Desi, if I could ask you to comment on that. And obviously, students are identified as having these needs at different stages, perhaps, across the schools. So what is your general perspective and the school's general approach to supporting the social and emotional needs of these students?
Well, you know, when I first started into this gifted education area 30 years ago, it was all about curriculum needs for the student, and it was just ignore all that other stuff. It wasn't specifically said, but it was just not mentioned, and ignore the disabilities and ignore all those things, just get all those models up and going. And that, as the 25, 30 years have gone on that I've been around gifted students, we've obviously changed and realised the importance of meeting the needs, these social and emotional needs. And if we don't meet these social and emotional needs, we're not going to have students who are going to perform with our curriculum. So there's no point. We need to actually be dealing with it and supporting these students. So, you know, we've done a lot of PD and a lot of in-servicing here at Loreto, and about how we cope with these students and what we should be doing for them. And I suppose my number one takeaway is validation, is validating the student. And before you can even start dealing with their social and emotional needs, and before you can start offering support, whether it be psychologist support or counselling support, or whether it just be the classroom teacher doing in-house support, you need to sit and validate how they're feeling. So that comes from Dr. Min, who works a lot on the social and emotional needs. And if it's one thing he says over and over again, is validating. So we're working really hard as the staff to validate. Sometimes, I know we all know deep down that that's what we should be doing, but sometimes we're too busy. We're trying to train the staff into saying, okay, we have to actually sit back and say, you're really anxious about doing a NAPLAN Year 9 test. That's okay, I hear you. Before I even start dumping into giving them lots of strategies and support and all of that. So that's what we're focusing on at the moment here at Loreto, is doing that. And you know, one of our number one problems or issues with the students is anxiety. So anxiety is all about just sitting back and listening to what the student is anxious about and validating that that's okay. You know, anxiety is a natural feeling. It's okay. All of us have it. So yeah, validating would be my biggest tip to take away.
And is that something that is done ad hoc or as required, or is it something that you sort of more explicitly look for and look for opportunities to do?
Oh, it's not done ad hoc, it's just done all the time. We're hoping that it's done all the time, whether it's just be the student you're talking to in the classroom or whether it's in the hallway that there's an issue. It's all the time, this validation. It's okay, I hear you. We can't argue with their feelings. If they are feeling anxious about NAPLAN, then I hear you. And then hopefully we get to the point where we say, you should try this because failure is okay and you learn from failure, but you just don't start that from the beginning with, oh, look, come on, you're okay, nothing's going to happen. You're doing NAPLAN. What's the worst that can happen? And that by this stage, you've got a child who's in total meltdown. Instead of starting the conversation with the students of, I hear you, this is difficult, let's sit with that. Then once we've got past that, okay, now, how do we get you in? How do we get you to do your NAPLAN test? What's going to make it easier for you? How can we help you?
Yeah, we've had an interesting question here about students who perhaps might resist that or might choose always to do a core assessment only, or not to actually push themselves for whatever reason. Melinda, what are your thoughts on that? Is there a way to sort of less overtly encourage them to take the risk and to engage in those more challenging activities?
Yeah, look, thanks, Lauren. I think students are more willing to take risks when they feel safe, they're validated, and they feel like they belong, and that they're in an environment where it's okay I'm not going to say to fail, but it's okay to really to take risks. Our school is a comprehensive school. We have, in the secondary, we're triple stream. We have an extension class and 2 mixed ability classes, which aligns very well with the research literature. But the one thing that I approach all of our students with is what's called growth. So I'm always talking to them about growth. So it actually doesn't matter if I'm working with a student who might be growing in their social emotional needs, a student who is growing in terms of challenging themselves academically. The language that I use is very similar. And I talk with my students about all of them. Where is the bar for you? Can we raise that bar? Can we challenge you a little bit more? And so we've got a lot of work to do, but by talking that and embedding that type of language and that sense of feeling in the culture and that safety, that goes a long way in individuals recognizing that that's okay to do as well. Similarly, for the students that might be experiencing high anxiety at certain points, 2 things is working through, well, what toolkits can we provide for them to work through? And the only way you're going to be able to provide a toolkit is if you get down to, well, what is the root cause? Am I worried about failing? Am I worried I won't get an A and my parents won't like it? Am I worried that my friends will find out I might not be as smart? What is it? What is it? And you're not going to be able to support them through that safe journey if you can't nourish together what actually is the root cause of why you're feeling like that. And this is where our counselling and wellbeing team are essential. They are partners with us in this.
And is that the same for those students who are afraid of standing out, afraid of being different and appearing different to their peers and their friendship groups, for example?
I think all students who experience difference, so a difference in any way to neurotypical peers, are going to be, or may experience that concern around standing out. I know, particularly for our young gifted kids, is that they know coming into kindergarten that there's something different about them. And it's really, we have interesting conversations with parents about explaining what giftedness is, and some might use the word and some might not. You can use age-appropriate discussion, because when we're really talking about social emotional needs, we've been talking a lot about social needs based on like minds and the essentialness of being and learning alongside cognitive peers and like minds. But emotionally, they need to understand so that their difference doesn't make them more special than anyone else, but actually doesn't make them less special. As a Christian school, we talk about that's how God made us, and we frame that right from the beginning, and we look at difference in that way. But they need to understand that their brain might be wired a little bit different. We recently did an acceleration, full grade acceleration, and for a younger child, and the child understands that their learning is best suited to the year they went into. That's the simplicity of it. And we made that, by making that okay, it becomes okay for everybody.
That's great. Thank you, Melinda. Lisa, I'm wondering what types of manifestations of social anxiety for these students that you see in your day-to-day teaching?
Yeah, unfortunately, I see it a lot, which is sad. You talk about the different profiles of giftedness, and I think my school's background being quite a high socioeconomic background, we have a lot of the type A successful students rather than the dropout sort of students. Not to say all of them are, but with that sort of perfectionistic tendency comes a lot of anxiety and stress, and I see it at a really young age, which is really sad. So something we've done to combat that, I mean, apart from just some things like, I guess, modeling making mistakes and things like that, we've actually tried to reinvent our assessment system at the moment. We've, I'll come back to that in a second, because I've just thought of something else we've done is a lot of parent communication, because we found out a lot of the parent bodies were, I guess it's called bribing their students with a puppy if they got all A's and some things like that. And they came from a well-meaning place, but we had to educate the parents. It's actually about the effort. It's not about, you know, a grade. So I think a lot of the pressure, as Melinda said, you can find the root cause. Some of it was coming from parents, or at least perceived pressure from parents. But something we've done is, yeah, we've sort of reinvented the assessment format at our school. And this is, I'm talking in the junior school. I'm not sure how accessible it would be for a senior school. But instead of, you know, week 8 in the term, everyone's got their clipboards up and we're sitting silently in a test. Can the assessment be, for example, with measurement for length, can they be asked to walk around and measure the room? The kids don't even know they're doing an assessment. It's not this thick booklet, you know, high stakes, sitting there silently. Can the student make a video explaining something in their own words? Is it possible for them to work with a friend? I guess just changing the boundaries of those traditional pen and paper, sit silently and do an assessment, we have noticed has made a huge difference. And when I've given marks back, some students, well, I didn't even know that was a test, and they're really excited, and working with them to create a rubric, involving them in the assessment. So help me make a rubric. What do you think would get 4 smiley faces or an A, or whatever language you want to use? And I've even found with some of my students, after they've done an assessment, getting them to mark themselves. And I find with the gifted students, they're actually quite hard on themselves. And then when they get their mark back and they've done better, they're usually quite happy. But I've found when I haven't gone through a process like that, if they've got 1 or 2 wrong, they might be disappointed in themselves. But I think it's just reframing how we put the pressure on the students, and reframing any parent pressure if there is, getting the parents to really acknowledge effort and praise effort. You know, I really like how you've worked really hard on da-da-da, and you've, I don't know, put in all the effort that you've done to this, rather than, oh, you've got great marks. We don't often even write the marks on their papers. Things like that, avoiding the red pen. I don't know if anyone has any other suggestions, but we found that's helping with the anxiety and the risk-taking. If they're helping make the rubric, we can say, how could we put in our rubric someone who's got creative ideas or different ideas? And sometimes even with students with writing, I'll find if they're writing the same thing and they're not willing to take risks, I'll tell them I'm not even going to read it. It doesn't need to be an assessment. I want you to have a go. And I've actually found every single time I've done that, they've come to me at the end and they've said, can you read it? I want you to. But it's just getting them to start and get out of their comfort zone.
I think that's great. That's a great toolkit for teachers to have at their disposal. Lots of different strategies to trial, and obviously each child is different, each student is different. And what you said about parents is really interesting, and particularly in the junior school, I guess there's a lot of communication there. Do you have, obviously away from the classroom, do you have particular strategies of approaching these subjects with parents, and bearing in mind that, you know, some parents can be difficult to work with in that sense, that they want the best for their child, and that can come across in many different ways. What about communicating with parents, Lisa?
So we, I guess, have information sessions where we find, you know, a need arises. And we find that, as you said, the parents always want the best for their child. You know, we have very good parents, and they generally do turn up to things like that. And we go through the research, we go through, you know, reasons why. And I mean, we've had parents who desperately want their kid in certain groups and maths groups, and we've got examples where we can show the parents, here's a work sample of a child who's just written all over it, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this 10 times. Like, you can hear or read the anxiety that that student is suffering. But similarly, in those sessions, we can even show, well, because if your student isn't involved in that, You know, they're still being enriched. I guess it's, yeah, parent information sort of sessions is all we've done. I'm sure there's other avenues, but also parent interviews. You know, if there's a particular parent who's having a child who's struggling, I'll ask them, what works for you at home? Do you find they're anxious at home about things? What discussions do you have with them? And sometimes they've got some ideas that might work for us at school as well, and the converse.
Yeah, wonderful, thank you. Desi, does the manifestation sort of change the older the students are getting as they're going through secondary? Are there other more complex issues that you need to address or work with?
Oh, look, there is. I think, like Lisa has said, the number one thing really I see is anxiety and perfectionism. And I can't actually say it gets worse as you get older, because I see it in the junior school girls as well. So I see it literally K through to 12, the perfectionism coming through. And what I did want to say was that, you know, Lisa and Melinda, that's great. People have said all the things that they can do. I want to take my gifted and talented hat off and put on my other hat, which is I have a great belief in coaching. And that's another great strategy that you can use with these students. And that's not an expensive strategy, and you can learn to become a coach quite easily. And so when I got that opportunity in 2017, I was going overseas thinking I was going to be looking at all sorts of different models to help the anxiety and the social and emotional needs, and that would help them that way. And by the time I had come back to Australia, I had completely been converted to coaching for both teachers and for students. I have a lot of students that I coach, and I coach a lot of teachers, and they come and they sit in here, and it's a time, like I use the word validate, to validate them again, whether they're a K or a 12 student, whether they're a K or a 12 teacher, and anybody in between. You just do a lot of listening, you do a lot of validating, and a lot of the students know how to fix their problems, but they just don't have enough, they're not given enough time and enough quiet time to actually verbalize it. So often I find just asking a few simple questions after you've validated them can help them with a lot of their perfectionistic strategies. It's like, who have you seen that's like this? Who have you seen that's solved this issue? So you just ask this bank of questions, and we've got a bank of about 100 questions that we can ask our staff or our students. And if they're especially, and these sort of questions, I like calling them catastrophizing to coaching, but I'm not allowed to call it that because we didn't think that was particularly fair. But that's basically what it is. So whether I have a teacher who's suffering from some social and emotional issue or a student, you can coach them through it. That's saying we're limited because, well, I'm not a psychologist and I'm also not a counsellor. So we need to be aware that within the moment, there's only so much we can do. And I know that clearly if I had a student that was suffering high anxiety and they declared something to me that I knew was not in my field, I would have to say, oh, we'll have to stop there and refer that on to the counsellor or the psychologist. And I don't ever want to step into that realm. The coaching realm is a different part of, it's not the same as the counselling or the psych, what they do. So I would suggest that I see the same things, K to 12, basically, the same social and emotional issues in different stages. But I see great success in the coaching model. And when I travelled across to the States, I visited some really, once again, rockstar schools that I thought, and every second school that I visited, they had embedded in their school for their gifted students a coaching program. The teachers were coaching them. And since I've come back, I feel like taking it to the next level where you're coaching the staff as well. Because if you don't have socially and emotional balanced staff members, then you're not going to have socially and emotionally balanced students. You really need to support the staff as much as you support the students. And really, you should be starting with the teachers.
Yeah, and it's a great model for the students as
Great
well.
model.
So, yeah.
Great model.
So for teachers who are interested in looking at coaching as an approach, or even school leaders looking at coaching as an approach, where could they go? What sort of resources are available to them?
Yeah, well, there's lots of free resources online, but if you want to go to the main place for what most schools approach is what's called Growth Coaching International, GCI, and most schools, private, public, whoever, across all schools, they tend to use GCI because they're a great coaching organisation for educationalists. And you can do short courses, you can do one afternoon session, and in fact that's what I did 5 years ago at University of New South Wales. They were running, it was just an afternoon course from 12 till 3 at UNSW, which Growth Coaching was running it there. And I came out of that literally a zealot. It was 3 hours and it changed the way I deal with staff and students from there. So I just kept adding and adding and adding. And then eventually, if you go through GCI, they've got the complete coaching program, which is an 18-month course, which I completed as well because it just affected every part of my teaching, not just the gifted and talented and social and emotional needs of gifted and talented students. It was across for all staff and for all students. And a lot of these schools in the States are finding that coaching is far more effective than any other professional development for teachers. And it is a time thing. I know it's one-on-one, but if you want to invest in your students and you want to invest in your teachers, and especially in this pandemic world we find ourselves in, where there's more and more added and nothing taken away, there's a lot of social and emotional support needed.
Yeah, and I'm just responding to the question here, well, a comment here about counselling skills being embedded in teacher training, and speaking as someone who works in teacher education at a university,
Yes.
The courses are so jam-packed already, it's very difficult to fit in something like that. However, it is something that we're seeing increasingly on our Masters of Education courses. So it's a core subject on the Masters of Education. I agree with you that it is absolutely one of the key core skills, particularly as going into leadership. Yeah, Melinda, would you have anything to add to what Desi was saying there around coaching?
Yeah, look, I agree. I think, like, as a cohort, we've got to be cognizant that gifted students still need to learn skills. So they still need accessibility to, explicit instruction. It's just that, for example, they often learn that particular content in 2 to 3 repetitions as opposed to neurotypical peers 5 to 6. Similarly, we can't make sort of any assumption about any student, regardless of their intelligent level. And so, whilst coaching is not my area of expertise, what I do know and what the research points to is that gifted kids do require that sort of level of support, that level of instruction. Also, then on the flip side, is that the research that we are seeing regarding social and emotional development of gifted children, particularly, I was reading last year the second edition of the social emotional, development of gifted children by Neihart, Pfeiffer and Cross. That's a meta-analysis of all the research internationally on gifted education, and they said that in this second edition we are seeing that a repeat of what we saw in the first edition, that as a whole cohort, gifted and talented students aren't more socially and emotionally needy than their neurotypical peers. Now, I think we need to be cognizant of that, because what we don't want to do is make the assumption that a child is not gifted because they're not experiencing social emotional challenges. And that's where I think it can be really dangerous. Similarly, the flip side. So I think that's a really interesting book to look at. But I think we're seeing a paradigm shift really into the area of neuroscience, into the area of psychosocial aspects of talent development. And I think that's where the research literature is going to go. As Desi mentioned before, we are really experiencing the paradigm shift where, academic, it's not all about academics for gifted education anymore. It really is a wider focus on that that well-being and engagement factors in other opportunities. And even earlier tonight, we were speaking about different educational provisions across schools. A lot of that can really play into positive social emotional learning for gifted students, because they're with like minds, they're in a safe environment, they're feeling challenged, and they're engaged at their cognitive level. So those aspects, acceleration, for example, are just as important to play into that social emotional wellbeing.
Great, thank you. We have had a request that perhaps you could put the name or the title of the book in the chat. That would be wonderful if you don't mind, Melinda.
I'll do that now. Yes.
Thank you. And just to wrap up, I'd just like to ask Lisa and Desi, while Melinda's typing, is there something that you would like to see, that you would like to be able to do in this area that you're not currently able to? What would you like to see happen over the next 5 years?
Well, I have to go back to the coaching because I'm an absolute zealot of it. I would like to see it. I am on a mission to bring coaching into every school on some level, because I've seen the success of it. I've seen how well it works. Someone just asked a question in there about coaching. Oh, I can't remember. I think I've lost the question. Particularly relevant. It was a growth. Is there any? I have a complete several growth coaching, but is it particularly relevant? It's relevant for every student. That, I think, basically, was it just relevant for gifted students? It's relevant for every student, and it's relevant for every staff member. And you just need people who are trained coaches and have them in there. So that would be my one tip.
Wonderful. Thanks, Desi. And Lisa, we're going to give the last word to you. What would you like to see?
I guess just more upskilling of teachers. And it's great that, you know, obviously there's 50-something people here who are interested, which is fantastic, but more opportunities. I know my undergraduate course was many moons ago, but I think I did maybe a week on gifted ed. And when I went and did my master's, it blew my mind. It was all new information, and it really shouldn't have been that new and different. Whereas, you know, some other curriculum and leadership courses didn't blow my mind quite as much. And I just felt, why hadn't I heard of all of this before? And it really made me question what I had thought was amazing. You know, I used to have a fast finishers box, and I used to think I was so good for having it. But when you really learn what it's about, you start to question that. And so I'd love to see more and more teachers upskilled in this area. And I just saw a question about extrinsic rewards someone wrote. And I think it's about finding out about our students and surveying them, asking them, what do they like? If we can make them want to do something and enjoy it and turn it into something they're passionate about, and we do that right through, even in the senior school, they have a group that meet and they ask what they want that term's topic to be about. And, you know, the year 11 group have chosen study skills, you know, year 8 have chosen help me manage and organize my time and my whatnot. And another year group said, can we make escape rooms? Well, they're all really useful. So if we can hear what they want to do, I think they will push themselves to the limits. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for a wonderful discussion and so many great ideas and resources for everybody here tonight. Thank you so much. And we would love to follow this up again in the future. In the meantime, Patrick, I'm going to hand back over to you to wrap up the session this evening.
Thank you, Lauren. On behalf of the Teachers Guild of New South Wales Council, I would like to thank our distinguished panel, Lisa, Melinda, Desilee, and Lauren, for your time and dedication in engaging us all in a very informative discussion on the opportunities and challenges on our important topic today, the social and emotional needs of gifted students. The Teachers Guild of New South Wales thanks you for your friendship and congratulates you on the work that you have been leading in making education the vibrant professional association that it is. Thank you. Just in terms of follow-up, the event recording will be sent out along with certificate of attendance and a short post survey to help us shape our future monthly online webinars. Once again, thank you for joining our event, and we look forward to seeing you at future Guild events. Please stay safe and well.